Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast. My name is James Dixon, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you are tuning in to today's podcast from. And on the subject of wherever you may be tuning into the podcast from, our guest today is in a lovely green location. It's not often that we get somebody who joins us as a guest on the podcast and is outdoors enjoying the fresh winter air that Great Britain has to offer with some lovely green background behind them. Our guest today is Anita Howard. Anita is the director of the ICE community and joins us from a back garden in London, I believe, Anita.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm here like in the garden, but it matches our theme for this year. Obviously, sustainability is such a key thing this year. So outside living is good, but also the internet broke inside. So there we go.
So necessity has put you in a position where actually it gives you a lovely PR story.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And red jacket and red headphones, you know, come on, that's working for you, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. Again, matching headphones and coat, and I said that level of detail is very seldom seen on this podcast. So we thank Anita already. Anita is on the show today to talk about a number of different things, actually. We are going to find out, first of all, a bit of Anita's background, and I introduce her as the director of the ICE community, and that's a really good start point for us on today's podcast, Anita. Tell us what the ICE community is, and particularly what ICE stands for.
Yes, absolutely. So the ICE community we established about 5 years ago, and it actually stands for In-House Corporate Event Organisers. And everything we do is to build the in-house corporate community and empower them to look different within their organisations so that they look very strategic, and also to try and get events recognised as a true marketing channel within their business units, so they look more strategic. And we started off with some ICE awards, which is something that is very lovely because people actually get recognised and rewarded by their community. No agencies are allowed to enter or suppliers, it's just for corporate planners. So it's really exciting to see their excitement on the day as well when they win. And we've had winners like, KFC, we've had ITV, Barclays, so some major companies, and very disappointed companies when they don't win, someone like Siemens, which was very sad last year. So anyway, but they're entering again this year. So we start off with the awards. We then sort of like do high level events for global heads of events. And we basically have an online kind of information portal. Sure. And then basically we also have some research, which is what our key thing is try and start benchmarking events within the corporate sector. So it's really exciting. I just love, everyone just loves it.
Sure.
It's a real feel-good community.
And everybody listening to this podcast will have come across the term corporate events.
Yes.
But I'm sort of keen to maybe explore a little bit with you the growth of the actual corporate event planner and organizer that works within their actual organization. Because this strikes me perhaps, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but a role that has grown certainly significantly in the last decade or so, where perhaps these people may not have started as event organisers within their organisation, but as events themselves have grown and the value of events has been seen to be much more valuable to any given corporation or business, that they have grown into these. So I suppose the first question is, have the majority of people that you have experienced and come across as in-house corporate event planners grown into that position, or have they got a background in event organisation prior to joining?
Yes. So what's really, really interesting, so from the survey we did, the kind of like the average size of event planners, it's 1 to 5 people within their teams, but then we've got other organizations where it goes up to 100. So this has been going on for some time, that people are seeing events more strategically within their organization, and they actually want to be seen professionally, making sure that the experience is correct, and it actually is pushing forward the brand of their organizations. So the teams have been growing significantly, which is really very interesting. And I think one of the things that they have, our definition of a corporate to be part of our community is someone who's spending at least 80% of their time organising or marketing events. So we don't necessarily go for the PA level.
Sure, yeah.
Because obviously that's a very different to what we're actually looking to achieve. There's a lot of those out there. So, you know, that's something that they like to come together, but they haven't pulled together in the past. And this is what we're trying to do as the community, because we really feel that my supplier and the agency market have so much to give to the community, but in the traditional platforms, it's more sell, rather than actually, let's build a relationship up. There's some really interesting knowledge that I could share with you that would help me look more strategic within my organization. And that's what we're trying to do, is empower people within the community with you know, the right information to become more strategic.
And it's interesting that you've differentiated quite early on how you see the type of planner that you want to deal with within this community, because as you rightly point out, you know, you could say the word corporate events to some people and they will immediately think of the Christmas party. Now that's a corporate event, a big organization having their party. It might be that somebody in that organization that's all they organize, and then for the rest of the year they're doing a different job entirely. And what we're talking about here are the people who work for probably large organizations who actually now spend the majority of their, you know, business life organizing not just social events and things like that for the actual organizations, but genuine business events to aid to benefit the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what's really interesting, is that I think in the past, and obviously it's still considered a back end role kind of thing.
Sure.
But I think what's really important, the budgets that our community control, they basically should be seen more strategic. Like, you know, years ago, you wouldn't have a chief marketing officer on the board of a big organization. I would love to get a chief events officer or actually sitting on the main board, so that they're strategically feeding into their events and their profile. So they're not just doing it for the sake of, and much of our community, that's our big thing, is that they want to be very strategic. They want to be able to measure, everyone's favorite word, the infamous words, but they actually want to see what effect the events had on their brand and their brand impact. So there's quite a lot of things that they're looking to achieve. So they're almost, some people would say, like an in-house agency, you know, like they're thinking strategically and creatively, because a lot of them are really, really creative. And I think that's not often recognized and by the stakeholders within their organization. Sometimes you have stakeholders actually going to agencies for the ideas, when a lot of the ideas are within the team as well. So I think there's a great collaboration that could be done. And I know from the research that we did, ICEINSIGHTS, we actually, a lot of them wanted the suppliers to be a little bit more creative rather than just doing it like the standard way, so that they could collaborate and then push the idea through to the, you know, the stakeholders. So really interesting.
It is. And I suppose when you think about it, it's almost nonsensical in a way to have a strategic board of stakeholders in a large organization and not have the people who are ultimately tasked with engaging their audience. If you want to build a business, if you want to create new business, if you want to create new customers and an expanded client base, you have to engage them somehow. And more businesses now are seeing the value in live events as that way of engagement, whereas before it might have been printed advertising in B2B media or otherwise. And of course, if you want to engage, you should really be speaking to the people who are going to be tasked with that engagement process.
Yes, absolutely.
There is a strong argument and strong case, just from a common sense point of view, to have events people working strategically at the top of businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things with people at the top of their businesses, like there was, in the research, there was a proactive and a reactive team approach. So a lot of the proactive people are actually setting the objectives in advance of seeing the stakeholders and then collaborating with them to actually build up that information. And I think that is so key to actually collaborating between the different business units to actually get the best out of it. And I know from a supplier point of view, that's sometimes hard to get past the planner measure into the, you know, sort of like the board level. And maybe if we try and push the event planner up further, is that they'll get on the board, and then, you know, we can get more, you know, sort of like measurement coming out of the events as well, because they've got great ideas of what they want to achieve.
Sure. And I'm not cutting across you, but just
get them past sometimes.
To just reinforce what you're saying there, I'm now referring to page 14 actually of ICEINSIGHTS of the research.
Yes.
That's been published, and on page 14 it talks about the proactive and reactive approach, and there are, you know, 3 key points given to identify how each one of those is differentiated. So the proactive approach: prioritize events as part of a wider strategy with a focus on ROI and achieving objectives. Embed events in the wider company strategy and decide which events to organize. That's the proactive approach. The reactive approach, which may be very familiar to some of our listeners, is receive a brief from the stakeholders, have more flexibility about which events they organize, and less structure.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's, you know, sometimes you have to be reactive. You know, when there's your CEO comes up to you and says, like, this message we need to get out there, we need to actually, you know, they need to be reactive, so they have a different approach. But a lot of the time when you've got big budgets being spent on events, let's get the benchmarks in place that you want to measure, because it's a great thing that people want to share information. I think as an industry, that would be a really interesting thing for us to consider, is how could you start sharing some of that information, that, you know, number of delegates versus the feedback and things like that. And that's something we need to work together on, to try and help the corporates share that information in a kind of very Chatham House rules type thing, so that we can get some measurement. Because I think that's what I don't know if it frustrates you, but, you know, everyone talks about the return on investment and everything else, and we actually just say, right, here's 5 simple things that we're going to measure in a year as a community, and therefore that would be really useful for to talk to their stakeholders about what works and what doesn't work. And that's a piece of work, I know I've spoken to Molly, that we're doing at the moment. We're trying to get some of these ROIs in place as simple measurement tools.
Well, just in terms of the actual type of events you will speak to, as part of your role, you will know and speak to many different in-house corporate event planners and organisers.
Yes.
Are the actual types of event that they are organising covering a broad spectrum? So that are they delivering events for internal events, so they're delivering in-house conferences and conventions where in a big organization all the staff are getting together and using that to drive internal communications and internal growth? And are they also doing a combination of external events where they're actually inviting their clients? How does it differ?
Yeah, so the big thing about internal events, I think, you know, one thing that you actually see is that there is a large percentage of people organising both. So you've got the internal events as well as the external events, and they could be exhibitions, sponsorship activations, but then also we'll have within the community. So someone like at our ICEAWARDS, the conference we do lots of case studies where the actual corporates stand up and talk about how they did their events.
Right.
So you have people like ITV, you have Siemens, we had Catherine McCartney from TED, who basically, and this year we've got Cisco coming as one of our keynotes.
Of course, and Cisco Live being a judge.
Yeah, exactly. So that they're sharing different types of events. So some can be internal, like we had the atomic weapons in people, AWE, come in and talk about running an internal. The CEO came in and he wanted to run a fun day for the staff and their families, at an atomic weapons
Okay.
It's great fun, where we actually found out how the team actually got to the grips of, well, how do you deal with security, but how do you actually coordinate that? So it's a very, very interesting thing. But then you had someone like RBS, where it was an internal meeting where they got their stakeholders together. It was the best leadership event, I think. And that again was very interesting to hear the different types of events these this community is doing. And
Sure.
I think it's so funny is, you know, when you see some of these, like ITV's presentation was amazing when you saw all of their, you know, you think it's big budget, but it was more to do with actually the logistics of actually getting in there. So I think that sharing of information within any community, and I think this is where the MICE community could really help the corporates, is share relevant information that's interesting and not just sell, so that they feel more comfortable to come and ask for information. So we call our suppliers our advertisers,
Sure.
you know, or sponsors. We call them mentors, because we think they can actually coach people to do things. And so we've got a great thing. This came from the corporates, because we're obviously led by the corporates. We've got a thing called ICE under the skin, or behind the scenes, that's what it's called. And it's basically where they're going to send corporates to go behind the set of, say, Blitz or whatever, GES, and actually see what a widget is, because they don't know nobody knows what young people don't know what things are until they've experienced it. So this is to try and give them some kind of real experience and get them engaged with, and not feel scared to ask questions, which I think is always a big issue, isn't it?
There is, and I suppose also that leads me to a thought about the development of corporate event planners, who, again, I'm not suggesting that they all fall into this category, but some of them may have grown into the role of being a corporate event planner, having started maybe in public relations, or in the marketing team, in the comms team, you know, wherever they've come from, and developed this role as somebody who predominantly works in planning and organising events, and maybe retrospectively giving them insights and training into the various different elements that have to happen in order for an event to take place, be that the venue sourcing, the how AV is designed and put together, you know, watching the guys come in and actually build and turn an empty space into something that actually works as an event. Because I've seen a lot of event planners with their clipboards turn up once all the build and the donkey work has been done. Perhaps, and I'm not suggesting everybody, with not a great understanding of how that's actually come together over a period of 24 or 48 hours.
I think it's the younger teams, you know, it's the younger people, although they may be going on courses and everything else, you know, wonderful management courses. I think that whole thing about, you know, you become a brilliant organizer after so many years, don't you? You suddenly go, oh my God, do you remember the time that happened? In fact, we do this great thing called ICE, which I'm really bad at names, but it's the things I wish I knew then, and it's at the end of ICE Day. And literally we had a panel of people, there was about 5 people, we run it a bit like Graham Norton, and it's people just going, oh my God, this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. It was very funny. Obviously Chatham House rules, totally. But it was really, I think the behind the scenes thing we're trying to do is that thing about training people up to know what's expected, because I think there's a great fear where people are scared of making mistakes, where I know I've been in the event industry for 30 years and I've definitely made a few mistakes along the way, and I think sharing that knowledge, it's okay to make mistakes because you're live, you can do it, is fine, you know. And I think that confidence building within the corporate community will be great, and this is where I think the MICE community could really help.
Is it interesting you say that? Interesting you say that about you know, sort of being able to look back at, you know, if I knew now what I knew, or if I knew then what I know now. That you know, thought leaders will always extol the virtue of that we learn from our mistakes. You don't learn from what you get right, you really learn from what you get wrong. And yet, as an industry, or, you know, or any business industry, you go to conventions and conferences and it's full of people telling you how to do it really well, like, because this is how they've done it really well. I can't really think of many instances where I've seen people stand up and say, this is everything that I've got wrong, as a means to maybe guiding people as to what they could get right by, you know, and maybe that's an interesting and a different way of approaching training and development, is to actually get people in a room together and you're only allowed to discuss what you got wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the great thing about this session we did at the end of ICE Day, and we're going to do it again this year. So we had like Dale from DRP and Ben from Maritz Travel. You just had them, and these are very senior people, and you just go, Yeah, that's fine. They've shared it with a young audience that's in front of us, and I think that's so cool because, you know, this industry, the world we live in now is you can find anything out anytime, can't you, on the internet and everything else. And I think with one of the reasons we set up the awards was that we basically had a situation where the people were only being recognised for what they did wrong rather than recognised for what they did right. And the awards were set up with that in mind to try and recognise these great achievements. So I think this would be a really fun thing to do as an industry. And we've got a book that we're trying to write, myself and Sue Munro. We've got a URL which I'll send you guys, which actually is so that we can all submit our stories, and you can do it anonymously, and we're going to do it for a charity, you know, NSPCC or something, any books sold. But it'll be a really fun thing, you know, when you go, anyway, join my organization and here you have a book on everyone's mistakes. It'll be just so much fun, I think.
It would be. And you've touched on the awards there. This is an awards that's going to be in its 6th year this year.
Yes.
And takes place on the 9th of July. 2020, and just looking at some of the categories to give people an idea of what sort of things are going to be recognized. Best motivational event, best sponsorship activation event, best leadership event, most sustainable event, a key one obviously for all events now is sustainability, best international event, best use of technology, logistical challenges, etc. So what I would say is, and I mean this as a positive, is these are pretty obvious category titles, but what we've got that's different from other awards is that this is focused solely on the in-house corporate event planners, actually giving them a platform by which they can be recognised, which in every other sort of awards, they would just have to enter alongside the agencies, alongside the big advertising guys, alongside all the experiential agencies that have been doing this as specialists for 30 years. This is giving them their own chance to shine, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And they just love it. You know, I think, you know, so many people actually like this whole concept about trying to work together to get the corporates, because everyone's always after corporates, oh, we must get into corporates, but to actually help them with their roles. And that's what we're doing by the awards. They just adore it. They really do love it. And, you know, we get round about 78 entries, so our competition is getting very fierce now. And you get, you know, you don't have to, the size of the budgets does not matter. So the AWE event, for example, was a very small budget, but she won, you know, they were just over the moon a couple of years ago. And then you'll have something like, you know, from Barclays, which, you know, again, everyone thinks everyone's budgets are big. So we never mention budgets. Everything is all just about what the content is. The judges are all agencies or industry professionals that have been around for years. And then basically, you know, then the awards are actually announced on the night. So it's really great fun. And if you are an in-house corporate planner, please enter, because, you know, you don't have to be a massive team. And, you know, like we have in-house team of the year award, and that gets won by small teams. Okay, the BBC won last year, but like the year before, it was Universities UK, which is a corporate organizer, tiny little group of people, 4 people. So it really is, and it makes you feel great winning against the big boys as well.
I'm curious to ask, there's an award that's grabbed my attention. It's most disruptive event. And I'm curious to know how you would term a disruptive event.
Well, this is basically, so what we decided to do on this one was, it was a little thing that you've done at your event that has disrupted how the stakeholders wanted to run it. So it might be that you just basically use paper cups instead of glasses. I know that's not very exciting, but, you know, it can be really small. But it came out of the idea that someone at a government office that I went to, and they chose a really funky venue in Cardiff. You know, there's only a few venues in Wales. They chose a funky kind of venue, and it was a very stuffy scientific event with investors. And they actually had all their exhibitors in containers. And unfortunately, it started raining. So, but then the containers were sloped down the wrong way. So it didn't quite work out. But she would have won the award for being daring, and everyone loved the concept. It was wonderful. It was a really cool thing to do. So it's basically things like that, you know, like how have you made it different to you know, previous things you've done. So it's really a fun one to enter. I would definitely go in for that one.
Absolutely. And I suppose that ties back into what we were talking about, maybe bringing event planners and corporate event organizers up to a higher level within their organizations alongside the stakeholders, so that they can find out a little bit more about the target markets, about the target demographics and things, and think maybe how they could change things up. You know, sometimes you don't want to, if it's a scientific event or a big engineering company, you might not want to put them into a traditional conference scenario where they all turn up in suits and ties.
Yes.
You might want to do something that's a little bit different to grab their attention and grab their concentration. So straight away they think, oh, well, this is a bit different.
Yeah, no, well, EY did an amazing presentation thing the other day, where Amanda Whitlock was talking about just, you know, the seats in the air and all the rest of it. It was just brilliant, some of the things they're doing. So they do, I think the planners, our corporate community, basically do know their markets really, really well. They really do. But it's influencing stakeholders to do it differently. And I think a lot of them are doing that now. And what Amanda did at EY was just colossal. It was fantastic.
And of course, as we'll know, Event Industry News, through our connections with Event Tech Live and the Event Tech Awards, is that more and more event tech is now available. And with that event technology comes an increased understanding of our audience and our audience responses, the metrics, the analytics, the data that can be collected now using the platforms that we have available and the tools that we've got available are now so important to organise.
And I loved your event. It was really, really great. And I think one of the things, the big thing that I think we need to try and do now is we looked at how much time people are analysing their events after the event. I think it's only 9% of their time is spent analysing their event, and we need to empower them, give them more time to analyse the data, so you just don't get the data for the data's sake, you know.
Of course.
And I think that's one of the things that would be quite interesting, is how do you make that time in your diary to analyse? Because I used to work but my background, I used to work in exhibitions and I ran my own agency, and I worked for Blenheim Exhibitions on Confex in the day. And literally, so one of the things that Phil Saw was amazing was making sure you analysed your data to buggery, so you had the right conversation to have with the person the following year, so that if you got they didn't really care about exhibitors, they cared about the audience, because if you got the audience working well, that was just fantastic. So you know, I think a lot of the community want to do that, and I just think we need to help them just make more time to analyze the data that's available and all these great event tech stuff.
Sure. Well, but the flip side to that, or maybe not a flip side, but one thing that I would say to planners and people maybe using certain tech platforms for the first time, is not to be scared of saying to the tech providers, I don't want everything that it can do straight away. Because if you go from a scenario where you admit that you've not spent a huge amount of time looking at your data post-event, using a new tech platform that suddenly gives you pages and pages of analytical information, you're actually not going to improve how much time you're spending, because you'll look at it and you'll be so overwhelmed by how much is there that I think it can put people off. And it's just an observation from what I've seen.
Absolutely.
I think in the first instances, organisers should be, you know, confident and strong enough to say, actually, it's great that your platform can give me all of this, and what you're selling is great, but in year one, could I just have these key bits of information? And if I need anything else, I'll come to you and ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you could come up with 5-10 things that we could measure as an industry that could become, is that a normal thing for it to happen? That would be even better. So I'm sure there must be things out there, tools out there that do that, but it's sharing that information. And I think that's one of the things we'd love to try and achieve as a community.
Sure. You've got an awful lot of stuff going on in the next few months. And before we wrap up today's podcast, it's important that we really give people the information that's relevant to this. So I've already mentioned that the awards themselves are on the 9th of July. The awards also coincide with ICE Day, and we've got the ICE Talks during the day, which will then run up to the awards, I presume, in the evening.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. So that's on the 9th of July in London, and then basically we have a how to enter workshop. So if you've got an award entry that you'd like to enter, come along to that. That's on the 27th of March, and then we basically then have, at the end of the year, we then have ICE Talks again. So it's basically just, if you go to www.ice-awards.com, that's where you'll find all the entry information and basically more about us. And we also have ice-online.info, which is where we put a lot of our information out, like my stories about, sort of like, Stephen Rose or Joanna Lawler from AstraZeneca and people like that.
Sure, absolutely. And head over to the website, because it's not just got information on there about the awards, but there's information about ICE Day and what's going to be happening on the whole day. There's also a tab on the website called Research, where you can look at some of the information that the organisation has published. So head over there and find out what you would like to find out. There's a contact us page, so I'm sure anybody heading towards that website will be able to contact Anita and her team to find out a little bit more about what's happening there. So Anita, that brings us nicely to the end of today's episode. And thank you very much for taking the time to join us and talk to us a little bit about it, and bringing to our attention the world of the corporate event planner, and quite rightly focusing a little bit more of the spotlight on the work that they do as a in our industry. It's been great having you on the show. Lovely. If you are watching today's podcast via eventindustrynews.com, don't forget that you can also check out all the news, features and supplements that's on the website whilst you're here. And you can also go to your favourite podcast downloader on your smartphone or device to listen to audio-only versions of all of our podcasts. Of course, the flip side to that is if you are listening to today's podcast via your podcast platform, head over to eventindustrynews.com and check out some of the latest news, features and supplements and stuff that's going on in the industry. That brings us nicely to the end of today's episode. Our thanks once again to Anita Howard, our guest today, Director of the ICE community. My name is James Dixon, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Event Industry News podcast. Goodbye.